Tracking along the river today, I found some nice otter tracks, and I thought I would show you all how to compare them to raccoon, because those two often get confused and they're found in similar places, so it's good to know the difference between them. Okay, we've got the trail of the otter here, and before we get into looking at the individual tracks, I hope what jumps out to you all first is the pattern. These tracks are in distinct groups, unlike a dog or a cat that will walk or run at sort of an even pace, going left, right, left, right. We can see that the otter is moving in a significantly different pattern. For me, with these otter tracks, the pattern alone is enough to recognize these for what they are. Each animal will have sort of a baseline way that it moves through the world. So for humans, we tend to walk. We do other things. We crawl, we run, we jump, but 99% of the time, a human is going to be walking. And it's the same thing with other animals. So the coyotes are going to often be in a trot, cats in a walk, rabbits in a bound, and otters in this pattern that we call loping. Okay, getting into the individual track, you'll notice that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 toes on each foot of the otter, and that will hold for the front feet and the hind feet. What I like about this set is that you can draw a line through the middle and understand intuitively which of these tracks came from the left side of the body and which came from the right. So we've got over here 1, 2 on the left, and over here 1, 2 on the right. And the next thing that we want to do is figure out which of these tracks came from the hind feet and which of them came from the front feet. So this track here, and we'll zoom out, we know that it is on the left side of the body, the front left foot. And what I want you to notice is that the 5 toes are in an even arc, somewhat evenly spread out at the top of the foot here. And now we're going to pop up to this next track here on the left side of the body. And we know that one's the front, so this one has to be the hind. And what you all should notice is that these 5 toes again are not spread out evenly. We've got one of them way down here, and this is like the thumb of the otter. And what I really love about tracking is when we are able to use our own hands and feet to sort of mimic what we see. So you'll see that there's these 4 close together, and then what I'm calling the thumb drop down here. And that's mimicked perfectly in our human hands with these 4 fingers pointed forward and that thumb dropped down low. So it's this toe that's really dropped on the otter, and this is the hind foot rather than, the front foot or hand for the humans. But you can remember this because of the way that otters move when they are swimming. These feet are partially webbed, so they're using those back feet as big flippers to really push them through the water. Another good trick to recognize or identify otter tracks or check if it's the back foot is to cover up that toe that's really dropped. And when you do that, the track should actually look pretty symmetrical and maybe resemble a dog track at first glance. Those 4 toes are pretty tight and in line and all facing forward. And then once you remember once you see that last toe is there, you realize that it's an otter. Here's that same otter just 20 feet later, and hopefully you all should recognize now that these 4 toes all together pointed forward with the 1 toe dropped off. You recognize that as the hind foot of the otter, and the same thing here. 1, 2, 3, 4 toes with that last one dropped big time, the thumb, the back foot of the otter. And in this case, the otter is stepping on its own tracks. So there's a left front buried under this left hind. In the right front, we can see up here, these 3 toes, so that hind foot is coming down on top of the front foot. Another defining feature of this species, the otter, is that webbing between the toes, and they'll have that on the front feet and the back feet. It really wasn't showing up in this sand very well. So it's another one of those examples where just because you're not seeing it doesn't mean that it's not an otter, but when it is present, it's a really strong indicator that you are looking at some otter tracks. And here is our raccoon trail. The arrows are pointing to each of the sets of tracks. As we zoom in, you'll see that there are 2 tracks here side by side, 2 tracks here side by side, 2 tracks here, and that pattern continues all the way. So in contrast to the otter that was loping and kind of jumping from spot to spot with 4 tracks in a row and then a large gap and then another 4 tracks, the raccoon is leaving 2 tracks right next to each other at evenly spaced intervals. It's really good to be able to look for these patterns right away before you even get down to the nitty-gritty of looking for claws or toes or the shape of the pad or anything like that. From a distance, what is the overall impression of the trail? Like the otter, we can see that the raccoon has 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 toes right there. And this other track is the same. I think that last toe just got a little smushed. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 5th one is right in there. A good way to distinguish otter versus raccoon is that the raccoon has these long, slender toes that connect almost directly to the palm pad. You should see that these toes look longer and pretty flat, and they're coming in all the way to the pad, versus the raccoon has these toes that almost like, instead of being flat like this is the raccoon, the otter has these toes that are kind of like that, and they dig in ahead of the palm pad compared to the raccoon, which will press its whole hand in pretty flat like that, almost like a human. So if you see these things that look like baby handprints, there's a good chance that that's a raccoon. You can also look for the claw marks on a raccoon track, and here they're showing up as these tiny little pinpricks at the edge of the toes. And sometimes they're actually a little bit extended. They're not quite connected, but these will show up in all different ways. Otters will have claws as well, and they tend to be a little bit more blunt and thick and often connected. So the otter might look something more like that. That wasn't helpful. The otter might look something more like that. That's bad too. Don't listen to me. If all of this was review for you and it was too simple, the next challenge is to identify within these 4 tracks which tracks are the front and which tracks are the hind. Again, if we want to do just the left and rights, that's a lot simpler because we can draw our line down the middle and understand that these 2 tracks came from the right feet and these 2 from the left feet. Let's take a closer look for the front and hind. There's a couple things I look for to distinguish the front from the hinds. The first one is, how are the toes arranged on the foot? We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 here. They're spread pretty wide across the top of the foot. And here we can actually only see 1, 2, 3, 4. The 5th one is down here somewhere. But these 4 are all pointing a little bit more straight and more forward. Even if we take 4 toes from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, these 2 on the edges are pointing so much farther sideways than these 2. So when you see something splayed out more widely, that is an indication that that is the front foot. And this mimics the human hand again, where our hand is pretty wide. We've got these fingers on the edge spreading wide, versus our foot. If you could see my toes, you know, all of them would be pointing straight forward. So that's mimicked here in the raccoons, with the front foot having a wide spread like a hand and the back foot being more straight and in line like our human foot. Once you think you see that in one pair of tracks, it's good to move to the pair either in front or behind, and it should be the mirror image. So up here we've got the front right and the hind left. So when we come straight back, if that one up there was the front right, this should be the back right, and this should be the front left. And we can see that on the front left, these are more splayed out, more of that star pattern, and these 4 on the hind are going more straightforward. Compared to the otter, I think the toes on the raccoon are a little bit more slender. People often talk about otter toes being bulbous, as this like big point in the ground, and the raccoon, the overall track can be the same size, but the toe itself is just a little bit more narrow and doesn't sort of explode at the end of the track. It's more this narrow line that comes straight into the palm pad. Hopefully that served as a good introduction for you all as to some things to look for when you're out at the river looking for raccoon tracks and otter tracks. I certainly didn't cover everything extensively, but it should give you something to start with, and let me know what videos you want to see in the future. Thanks for watching.